Well, it was a fluke. Bill Majerus, who was one of our editors, who was the editor, was elected to be president of the ASCI. So he stepped down, and I was the closest person to him. We worked right next to each other. Had very good collegial interactions. So I volunteered to do it while he was doing presidency of ASCI. And it turned out it was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but a lot of fun. Well, we had 7 total, counting Phil and me. And the other 5 were outstanding investigators in the Department of Medicine, covering all the different areas of medicine. So it worked out very well. We received 3 to 4 papers each a week to handle. We had a policy that every editor reads every paper that he handles. And then we met once a week to go over every paper and had lunch. So we became very familiar with each other. And people took this seriously. And it worked out quite well.
I had a great time serving as a JCI associate and interim editor, primarily because the weekly meetings were actually fun, in comparison to the mostly grim, boring, or simply deadly nature of nearly all other administrative conclaves. Tom Stossel set the tone, which was informal and non-stuffy, but scientifically rigorous and entirely respectful of the manuscripts under review. The JCI then had a reputation for publishing high quality, well defended biochemical, physiological research that was, broadly speaking, clinically relevant. However, the JCI did not attract work that authors considered hot or really novel. Nevertheless, the discussion among the associate editors of the papers, the reviews, and the relevant field was lively and wide ranging, and greatly amplified the interest and value of the meetings for the editors themselves.
I didn't apply, I didn't volunteer, I just got a phone call. I got a phone call, it was 1985, and the phone call happened to be from Dr. Joe Goldstein, who was then president of the ASCI. Later that year became a Nobel Prize winner. And he asked me if I was willing to serve as editor. And it was a difficult proposal to say no to. I have no idea what the selection process involved, perhaps a council of elders, followed by a puff of white smoke. But, we changed it for the selection of my successor. We solicited applications. We interviewed candidates before selecting Ajit Barki, who succeeded me. And from my standpoint, it had the advantages of not only being more open and transparent, but also allowing prospective host institutions and editors to have the chance to identify talent and the resources necessary to really do the job effectively. Now, and as a corollary, I didn't really begin identifying my associated editors until I'd already taken the job. And I picked 6, mostly from UCSF, although a couple from Stanford as well. A really smart, thoughtful, funny group, talented, included Fred Murat from Stanford, who later went on to win the Nobel. But I think most importantly was a group that was able to debate effectively and honestly in a way that created a whole greater than the sum of the parts. And there was a bit of scrambling, and therein lies the advantages of the more open process. So the institution was really quite supportive, but academic wheels tend to turn kind of slowly. So once I identified the space, I actually had to get my own contractor to renovate it, so we were actually open for business in time.
Actually, it was the most unexpected honor at a relatively early stage in my career. By tradition, the chief editorship changes hands every 5 years to a new institution. As I understand it, my selection as editor was the first time there was an advertised open national competition. Prior to that, I believe the selection was made by the proverbial old boys in the smoke-filled back room. Many institutions responded to letters of intent, but since the existing editorial office was at UCSF, no other UC schools were intending to apply. But the leaders at UCSD suggested that I should apply just to make it look good. I initially demurred, but agreed that when I showed privately that I would not have any chance since I was a foreigner. So I started out my application by saying that I have not published in the JCI for many years, and this is reasons why, and put forward my plans for the journal. Turned out everybody else was simply going to continue as usual. Perhaps this reason I was the first foreigner to be selected as JCI editor. But this is America, and anything is possible. So I had the advantage of being in La Jolla, where there were many multiple high-quality institutions and many ASCI members. So I simply sent out a message to all these members, and many of them showed up for a meeting and signed up for the application. In particular, Paul Ensign and the late Marty Cagnoff encouraged me to apply. I served as deputy editors and then took over towards the end of my time to do something else at UCSD.
So this is an interesting background story. It really relates to the decision to have the JCI in La Jolla at UCSD. When I first saw the notice that they were going to move the JCI from the previous location, which I actually don't remember, I contacted the chair of the Department of Medicine, who was then Steve Wasserman. And I said, I think we should put in for the JCI editorship. He says, what, do you want to do it? And I said, no, I don't particularly want to do it, but I know who should do it. And he said, who's that? And I said, Ajit Varki. He would be perfect for this. And so Ajit applied, and I'll let him, when you talk to him, tell his story, because he has an interesting story about how he, I think, convinced them to let him do it. And so after he was picked, he said, well, you're the one that got me into this. And so I was one of the associate editors, along with several people from UCSD and from Scripps Research. I don't remember that we had anyone for sure from Salk, but I can't recall exactly. But at any rate, about 3 or 4 years in to the time we were doing this, he was asked to be the acting director of the Cancer Center. And he said, I can't do that. So since you're the one that got me into this, you have to serve as editor during the last year or so that we're going to have the JCI here. And he said, maybe to soften it, you should do it with somebody else so you guys can be co-editors and switch off and don't have to go in every day. And so I did that with Marty Cagnoff, who was in a different area than me. He's an immunologist. Unfortunately, he passed away from pancreatic cancer several years ago. And so we worked very well together. And so that was sort of how I sort of backdoored into it. Although in a way, I had initiated the whole process by suggesting Ajit. And Ajit held me to it that since you did this, you started it, you're going to have to end this cycle. So that's sort of what happened. Our institution has a number of hospitals, and we created a JCI office at the Veterans Hospital, which was about a 5 to 10 minute walk from where both Cagnoff and I and Ajit worked. And so that worked out pretty well. And then I think we had, I want to say, it was between 8 and 10. I'd have to go back and try to remember all the people, but it was in most of the areas of internal medicine that we were seeing papers. I remember some of the names of the people, but I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to try to, I'll just say that. But there were definitely people from, we got some people from, as I said, from Scripps Research who were very in certain areas, as well as people from UCSD. And we had a meeting every week to go over papers, and you had to essentially sell a paper to the other people on the committee to make sure among the editors that they believed in it, that they accepted it. So it was, you had to really know your stuff, so to speak, and where a paper really fit into the scientific community.
Actually, I think it was probably 1991, I got a call from the chairman of medicine's office saying there is interest in you submitting an application to be the next editor of the JCI. I thought about it for a few moments and I didn't want to just say no right off the bat, but I was thinking, no way. But I ended up calling some of the former editors, Tom Stossel, Bruce Scharschmidt, and when they described to me the level of activity and responsibility, I thought, no way am I going to do this. I was spending the bulk of my time focusing on my laboratory efforts. So I thought that was it. And nobody said anything. I said, that's fine, it's your decision. Then came 1996 or so. I got another call from the chairman's office, and I think this time it was Tachi Yamada was the chair of medicine. And someone said, have you rethought about entering the lottery to see if you could become the next JCI editor and bring it to Michigan? And I, very quickly I said, no, I thought about this before, but I think this is going to be so disruptive to my academic career that this is probably not the best choice for me. And there was a pause. And then they said, it was one of his representatives, there was a pause. They said, no, you don't understand, Steve. Dr. Yamada is not asking you if you're interested in doing this. He is telling you, you have to do it. So I thought, oh, great. So I said, well, wait a minute. I decided to put one more hurdle in the way that might save me. I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go after the 3 best scientists I knew and see if they would be interested in doing this. They said no. I'm sorry, I can't get enough traction here to really pursue this. So I called 2 Hughes investigators, David Ginsburg and John Lau. David Ginsburg being a world-renowned coagulationist that does all these molecular biology and genetics. And John Lau was another world leader in molecular glycobiology. Also figure I'm biasing in my favor. Since they are both Hughes investigators, the chances that they would have enough time to pursue this, I thought, would be close to 0. To my surprise, they both said, sure, we'll do it. And I said, no, you understand, it's 5 years and we're going to have meetings every single week. And they go, no, it's fine. So I thought, oh no. So I took one more person, Alan Saltiel. He was head of cell biology at Pfizer at the time, leading this enormous research group. He's over in industry, but he had an adjunct appointment over at Michigan. So I said, well, I'm going to ask Alan. I didn't really know any of them personally that well at that time, thinking, okay, he'll say no, but he said yes as well. So that was the end of it. So I said, okay, we will submit an application. And in order to submit that application, we had to round out the entire editorial board. So the 3 of us sat down together and we sort of decided each member of the board is going to either have to be a physician scientist or a basic scientist that's world renowned. Everybody knows them nationally, internationally, that they are rigorous and they're going to put the effort forth. And we came up with a list of people. To my recollection, no one said no. Everybody bought in. So that was a pretty simple process. And I still remember the interview. It was very interesting, but kind of fun. And then we got a call shortly thereafter and said, you're it. And then the university kicked in whatever we wanted. They were unbelievably, in terms of space, administrative support, everything we wanted, they agreed to. So it was an enjoyable process, almost too easy, did not prepare us for some of the little bumps in the road that occurred further on. But the first part was really great.
I can't really remember exactly what drove me to do this, but as you know, there was a family connection. My dad had been a JCI editor, so I was very familiar with the journal, and I felt like it was a good time to bring it back to Columbia. And I think most exciting to me was the idea of working closely with a really great group of colleagues, getting to know them better and sharing science with them. So I think those were the motivating factors. Of course, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I think it was about 15 on the editorial board. And I sat down with 2 colleagues, Kai Salicati and Ira Tabus, and we went through lists of colleagues and we picked the ones we wanted to work with. And we, obviously tried to get a balance and diversity and those things. But yeah, it was pretty easy because Columbia has so many great faculty.
I think I remember that the call for editorships came out ridiculously early, probably the summer or the fall of 2005, about a year and a half before you started. At that point, I had been at Penn for 11 years, so I knew people pretty well and I was fairly well connected. And I had also been the renal division chief for 7 years. And as you know, Ushma, knowing me, I don't like to do things for too long. And so having been the renal division chief for 7 years, I was already thinking, what am I going to do next? And what's next on the horizon for me? So I saw that, let's call it the advertisement. And I thought, this could really be a lot of fun. And we had great colleagues at Penn. And I thought I would really enjoy, if I got the job, being editor-in-chief and could put a really strong team together. So I applied. I had a lot of support towards the effort because certainly at Penn, having the JCI be at Penn was viewed as a real coup with a lot of prestige associated with it for my department chair and for the dean. So I had a lot of support. I remember I had what seemed like a frightening number of editors because there was a budget that one had to live with, and people did expect nonetheless to get stipends for their time and effort. So I want to say I had 19 associate editors and 3 deputy editors. It probably expanded over time. How did I choose them? Well, the first person I went to was Steve Emerson, because I knew he was a very good friend, and I thought we could have a lot of fun doing this together. And then I chose people based on balance. You needed to have people who knew different areas in biomedical research. And we also needed to spend an hour and a half in a room together every week, and then countless other times on email. So there was the no asshole rule. Sorry, I don't know if you can use that here. But it had to be people that I liked, or at least as many people as possible that I knew, and that actually who would do the work. So I knew Gary Koretsky pretty well. I was a little concerned that was too immunology heavy, but I knew he would do the work and be great. And then Maury Birnbaum was the third person who I had to convince to do it. But once he did it, he really did it with gusto and enthusiasm.
Well, it was very straightforward. A number of my colleagues noticed the request for application, and we got together and they encouraged the application from Duke. And they thought at the time that I would be a strong candidate. We could put together a very strong board. And that's what we did. We got a number of individuals to brainstorm about what the editorial board would look like, and got them together. And almost everyone that we approached was really excited to do it. Importantly, our dean, Nancy Andrews, was fully supportive, and that really helped. We were unique at the time because we were 3 institutions that put this together. It was Duke, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which was just down the road. And then we tapped into some expertise with editors at Duke NUS in Singapore. And so we were 26 associate editors and 2 deputy editors. And the choice of the 2 deputy editors was key because they were really involved in many important decisions that I needed counsel with. And so I got to know them terrific. I leaned on them. Their judgment was excellent. And it really helped in terms of the editorial process, especially with in areas that were a little bit tricky that we had to decide on what to do. And the 26 associate editors were terrific. They handled the manuscripts that came across their desk, and they were really terrific.
Hopkins was really quite keen on hosting the JCI. We'd never hosted it before, and I was asked by then Dean Paul Rothman to assemble a team and put together an application. It was a bit of an internal competition, but ultimately I was selected. I must say, I was a little bit reluctant. My area of research wasn't one that was highly featured in the JCI. In fact, at the time, I think I had published 1 paper in the JCI, although submitted a number more. And moreover, of the prior 4 editors, 3 of them were researchers in cardiovascular disease. So I thought this wasn't really going to work out, but it did. And once selected, I was really focused on making sure that the members of our team, who were already busy, would be committed to the work and we could keep them motivated. turned out not to be a problem. This was really a remarkable group of smart, intellectually curious people who were committed not only to science, but committed to the process of communicating that science and making sure that that was robust. I wound up really looking forward to our weekly face-to-face pre-pandemic meetings, which, you know, I consider to be the best biomedical journal club on the planet, frankly. And we had a great group of, you know, 3 deputy editors, Rex Ahima, who actually took over after I left to become a dean, 40 remarkable associate editors, most from Hopkins, some from University of Maryland, and some from the NIH, and really just a superb staff editorial team led by Sarah Jackson, but really terrific staff editors as well. So we actually thought this was a great learning experience for us, and we wanted to make sure that some of our trainees had that opportunity. And we can't remember where we actually started this, but certainly expanded what we call the JCI Scholars Program, where we invited postdocs, graduate students to formally participate in paper review, attend editorial board meetings, and present papers. So all in all, just a really remarkable experience for me. I wish I hadn't left to go do something else. I would have, well, although I stayed engaged and was part of the deputy editorial team for the entire tenure, I really wished. One of the things I regretted was not being able to do this for the full term.
Yeah, so it's just happenstance, I would say. So I spent many years at Penn, as you know, 16 years in all. And 2016 came to Hopkins to lead the endocrine division and serve as a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor. So in 2017, Gordon Tomaselli, whom I knew because through other people, because he's an alumnus of Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and I did my residency there and so on. So we got to know each other. And he was the chief of cardiology at that time. Became the editor-in-chief and asked me to serve as his deputy editor, together with Arturo Casadevall, who happens to have taught at Einstein, by the way. So we kind of knew ourselves. So I accepted, and things went well for a year, and somehow a year later, Gordon decided to step down and move to Einstein. And so that was a mini crisis, sort of, because none of us had kind of planned for this. But after some thought, I decided to step up, and we had to go through, and believe it or not, an interview process with the ASCI board and so on. So that's in short, that's how things played out. Yeah, so this is an area that is very variable because I had experience from Penn, as you know, serving as an associate editor. And then I came here and things were a little different. I mean, so there was some support, but to be fair, not to the level I saw at Penn. Having said that, we had a very enthusiastic group. So when Gordon stepped down, I was fortunate that Arturo Casadevall agreed to stay on as the deputy editor. And then we had even Gordon himself, even though he was at Einstein, agreed to also stay on as a deputy editor. So that helped a lot. And Greg Semenza, who was an associate editor at that time, agreed to step up and become a deputy editor. So we had a very strong group of leadership. We had an unusually large editorial group. So my count was about 40 associate editors, which is unusual. But the advantage there is that we had people with expertise across all our strengths as far as the JCI is concerned, right? Oncology, metabolism, infectious diseases, immunology, GI, cardiovascular. So that really helped. And many of these people were very well versed in their areas and had served editorial roles on different journals.
I had a longstanding interest in the JCI. I was a former president of the American Society for Clinical Investigation, and as a longtime author in the JCI. I have always sent what I think is our best work to the JCI. So it is a journal that has meant a lot to me because it's where I like to publish things. It's where I like to read things. And so I became very familiar with the journal many years ago when I had been president of the society. And so when I was thinking about things I might like to do, which actually goes back to probably 2014. And I was at the time moving from the University of Chicago to Northwestern. And it was one of the things I actually pitched to the dean at the time, saying, if I come, this is something I really want to do, and I hope I have your support to do it. And of course, he was very enthusiastic about it. And so it was in the works. It didn't happen the first time I tried, but it did happen the second time. And that was really nice to see, because it's great to be able to do this knowing you have strong institutional support, because we have leadership that really, really believes in the journal and what it stands for and what it means. And it makes it that much easier to do what isn't always an easy job when you have support of your institution in doing that. And it is one of the things I like about JCI, which is its ability to rotate from place to place every 5 years, which helps it evolve, I think, in a very positive way, and a strength of the journal. I think the JCI covers an enormous territory of science. Not only do we have to think about all the different areas of medicine and the basic and translational science that underlies that, but we do get a fair amount of clinical medicine. So we're also covering that basic translational clinical spectrum, as well as all the different disciplines within medicine. So it's a big scope. So I think in thinking about an editorial board, what made most sense to me was to make sure we did our best to cover those areas that received the most submissions, and you want to be sure that you weren't overburdening certain individuals because they were carrying all the load. So diversity of areas of expertise, I think, is a critical part of it. We obviously wanted people who are members of the society to be active and parts of it. And so again, we've got a pretty deep bench here at Northwestern, which has been great. So most of the people are from Northwestern, but what's been really great is we also do have a number of people from the University of Chicago who've been enthusiastic participants in the editorial board. And I really, really welcome their participation, because they've been able to be great in covering areas and giving us enough depth.